Hello, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Digital Leadership Associates. I'm also author of the book here, Social Selling, Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. With me today, I've got Mike Allton. Mike, usual question I ask before I get into we start talking about the thing is, where can people get hold of you?
So the best place to get a hold of me is at thesocialmediahat.com, because I'm on all the social networks.
You are?
But my site's where I live. So you can go there, and if you want to find me on Facebook or Twitter or Google Plus or LinkedIn or even LO, I'm there. But go to my blog.
Right. So you emailed me the other day and you said, hey, Tim, and I'm sure you sent this email to lots of people. And you say, hey, Tim, I've written a guide, an ebook that if you want to start a blog, this is the book you want to read. And I must admit, Mike, I looked at it and went, I've heard this all before. So I went and read it. And I started a blog. I started blogging, 4 or 5 years ago, and I knew nothing. And it was very, very scary. Because there's all this terminology and stuff that and I was reading it, and actually, if I wanted to start a blog again, I'd want to read that book.
Thank you.
So the reason why I'm inviting you on is because I wanted to talk to you about it, and explain and get people to understand, because blogging's kind of changed my life. And certainly from you talk about in your book about your journey and the fact that it's kind of changed your life as well. And I think it's just such an opportunity. And even if we can get one more person blogging from this interview, then I think we've done a good thing.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and it's interesting because what a lot of what I talk about is the mistakes that I've made, right? So I'm trying to help people avoid a lot of those same mistakes.
Yes. And you do that because you talk about, we'll talk about whether you go for free and stuff like that. And it's easy to start saying, well, we'll do it easy. But certainly that comes across in the book, is that you're writing from the mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you're empowering, because one of the things you quite often get about books is that I stand on a pedestal and tell you how to do stuff. Yeah. And you go, that person sounds really clever, but you've actually done it where you're actually empowering me to blog.
Cool.
So
that's the intent.
Yeah, and it comes across. So, and is that why you wrote it? You wrote it as a way of actually getting more people to blog.
Yeah, well, there's two main reasons why I wrote that, and that's certainly the biggest reason. I want to help people start blogs. I want to help people start blogs in a successful direction, right? Because lots of people start blogs or online businesses, and then it doesn't work for a lot of different reasons. Yeah. And my hope is that with that article, some of those reasons for failure can be avoided. But the second reason for the whole article is that I have another book that I actually started already that I really wanted to get deep into advanced strategies and tactics like influencer marketing and those kinds of things. Like the letter I wrote you, it wasn't to a lot of people, but it was to a bunch of people that, one could say that's influencer marketing. That's why we're here today on this call. So I wanted to write that book.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to have to teach people how to install WordPress, or other kinds of really, really basic things in that book. So I started creating this primer, and I said, I need to have this out first as a baseline, as a place for people to get started, and then go back to working on the more advanced techniques later.
Right. So I started a blog 4 or 5 years ago. I've actually moved on from that for various reasons. But if you were out there and wanted to start a blog, why would you start blogging?
Well, it's interesting because, again, that depends on the individual. They can have a lot of different motivations. It could be because they just want to talk about something that's really interesting to them that has nothing to do with their work. Like, I like Star Wars, right? So I could easily create a Star Wars blog and have a place, a home base for me to talk about that particular passion or interest. What most people want is money. Whether it's just a little side hobby, an extra income, a few $100 a month, to help them pay for groceries and stuff, or is it a full-time gig, or really for me, is it a stepping stone to a career? I'm the CMO for SiteSell, and I wouldn't be in that position if it weren't for my blog.
Right. And
And
so,
it's those latter motivations. That's who I'm speaking to. People who want to earn a living, at least a revenue of some kind.
yeah, so I mean, I have a friend he's a sales guy at Oracle Corporation, and he sails. His hobby is selling. Sorry, sailing, and he writes a blog about sailing. He doesn't promote it. It's just something that he does. He's not interested in earning money. You know, maybe he would if he gave up wanting to sell or something. But it's his hobby. But you do write, and actually there is a chapter which I skipped over because I'm not a big one on adverts. Where you could say, if you write a blog, you can actually sell this stuff and sell around, and you could make money from that.
Right. Probably
not a lot of money, but you could do that. And in some cases, if you go free, you end up having to give. If you do free stuff, then quite often what happens is you end up having to have adverts, just like on YouTube. That the only way that you can appear in search is to have that stupid 5-second advert that most annoying advert in the world, isn't it?
Almost.
Yeah. You want to see, you want to see that Eric Clapton guitar solo, and you've got this ad for a website or something. So, and so when you want to start up a blog, what do you think are the ways? Is it? Do you just sit there and write about anything, or what is it that you need to do in terms of direction of your blog?
Yeah, that's a great question, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why I wrote this article and this ebook the way that I did, because I don't want people to just start writing about whatever that is that they're interested in, not if their end goals are income related, right? Again, if it's just for fun, by all means, write whatever you want. But if your hope is to earn some money, a little or a lot, it doesn't matter. If you want to earn some money, that means before you start, you have to do some homework. You have to do some research and find out, does anybody else care about this particular topic? I might want to write about Stormtrooper cookie jars. Yeah. But if no one else cares about Stormtrooper cookie jars, I'm not going to make any money off that topic. And I know I'm not going to make any money off that topic, right? So I have to do some homework and decide, okay, is that just too narrow of a niche? Are there related topics, broader topics that I could write about? Or the reverse is also true, where people will start with a very, very broad topic, and it's too broad because there's too much competition. There's not enough niche interest. So it's not sustainable as a business. Both sides of that spectrum are going to lead you to failure. You need to have a very targeted, narrow niche where you know what you're writing about, your audience knows what you're writing about, they know what to expect from you, and there is an audience of some kind out there already that you know about using tools. And I gave some examples in the book about what tools you can use, how you can go about searching for these topics, researching, coming to some conclusions before you do things like buy a domain name and install WordPress and write your first post. That's all down the road.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, I think, that you make. So I've actually I've interviewed on these Mark Schaefer, who's written the book Known. And for those people that haven't read, it's worth interview to go and having a look at. But it's also a great book to actually have a look at as well. So the backstory behind that is that when I wrote my book, the publisher said, we don't need another book on personal branding. There's too many. And then when I heard that Mark had written a book on personal branding, I thought, oh dear, this is suicide. But as you know, if you know Mark, Mark's a thinker. And Mark, and this isn't about how to set up a LinkedIn profile. It's about how to set your stall out and work out what you want to be known for. So I have friends that say, I want to be known for digital disruption. And you go like, well, what is it? Internet of Things? Is it self-driving cars? Oh yeah, all of those things. It's too broad.
Yeah.
And you need, if you're going to be known for something, one, you need to research who's talking about that already. There's nothing wrong with entering a crowded market, but so if you're going to write about customer relationship management, I think there's quite a lot of people there already. You need to have something else that stands out. I decided I was sitting in a sales transformation and we were doing whole lots of things, and I thought, well, there's one bit I'm going to pick on is social selling. At which point I decided I'm going to write a blog on that, which was for me was that defined niche that you're talking about.
Right.
And I think it's important that you look about what you're going to be famous for, and you talk in the book about how you position yourself as authority.
Right. And that has to do with not only what you talk about, but how you talk through your writing, your voice, how often you write, those kinds of things. It's really important to have a sense for where you're going. Now, I get that if you are just starting a blog, you're not going to know all this stuff. You're not going to have all the answers. A lot of it has to be learned through experience. But my hope is that you're at least having some considerations. Monetization is another great example. You're not going to make money off of your blog from day one. And it's to the point where you probably shouldn't even try to make money from your blog on day one, because that's going to be a turnoff and it's actually going to impede your long-term growth. But if you have a plan, you can be working towards that plan. You can be working towards building your authority in whatever it is that you want to be known for, as Mark puts it.
And I mean, you talk in the book about finding your voice, and I think that's important as well. You need to write a number of things, and you talk about writing often and having a cadence to your writing, but also how that enables you to find your voice.
Right. And for a lot of people, they're like, what do you mean voice? What are you talking about? Right. So for the new blogger, your voice is the way that you write, and I equate it to the way that you speak. And I use myself as an example. You can look at someone's accent, you can look at the language they speak, you can look at the words that they choose to use, you can look at the style that they take when they're speaking. Are they, trying to be witty? Are they very serious and dry? Do they use pop culture references like I already have a couple times, right? Do they work those into that conversation, or whatever the case might be? So think about how you speak. And then think about, prior to that particular chapter in the book, we talked about finding your audience. So you have to marry those two. You have to think about the people that you're speaking to and how you want to speak to them, and start to develop a style, an approach that you think will work for both you and your audience. That's important. It's got to be both. Too much in either direction, again, is going to lead you down a path of failure. I had a client many, many years ago. I was building her a website, actually, and she was a cat lady, and she wanted bouncing cats and GIFs and flashing things. And I'm like, well, you might like all those things, but your audience is not going to appreciate that on a website. And it's the same way when you speak. It's the same way when you write. You have to find that mutual comfort level between what's good for you and what's going to be good for your audience.
Yeah, and I think if you approach it about how am I going to monetize this straight away, I think probably you'll come across as oversalesy. And the last thing that people want is to be sold to.
Exactly.
And what they're looking for is, a bit like this video. What I'm trying to do is create something which is educational, and that people can walk away and go, I've learned something from that. And it's about that education and that insight. And I think that's some of the things that you need to be thinking about when you're finding your voice, finding that niche, and then actually working out how can I take my expertise and show that online by actually writing about it.
Yeah, that's a great point, because part of what you're going to be doing, and this comes through in your voice, is you have to decide what you're doing for your audience. Right. So are you educating them? Are you entertaining them? Are you motivating them? Are you trying to help them imagine their future in a certain way? Even if you're selling something, you shouldn't be talking about what you're selling. You should be talking about how that applies to the person you hope would buy it. Right. A few years ago, I took a break from the IT world and I sold swimming pools and hot tubs. Right. And it was funny. It's around the same period that Marcus Sheridan was really heavy into his river pools business, if you know Marcus. And I learned some really interesting sales techniques there. When I'm selling pools, it's not about how tall the pool is, how thick the pool wall is, what the vinyl is made of, or the pattern on the vinyl, or what the motor was or the pump that's filtering the water. No. It's about helping each person who walks in that door understand how that particular pool is going to create an outdoor living space for their family, and how that's going to change every summer for the rest of their lives in their backyard. I'm not selling a pool. I'm selling an experience.
Yes.
Right. Of enjoying that swimming environment in their backyard. And the writing's the same way. Again, whether you're educating, motivating, inspiring, whatever the case might be.
Yes. And I agree. And it's a subtle difference between the two. And it's interesting reading the book also then talking to you, because you do write how you speak. And you know, when you know, apart from the fact I kind of feel that I know you because I see your picture everywhere on social media, I've never met you, but having read that book, I kind of felt that I'd had a conversation with you. And it is quite, it's not eerie. It's just that it's very clearly your personality, the way that it comes out.
Right. Yeah. And that's very deliberate on my part. I mean, I've been blogging for many, 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 many years, right? And this was a kind of a conversation I had with myself early on. How do I want to write? I wanted to write conversationally.
Yeah. So in terms of talking some of the technical details, you know, I've decided what I'm going to blog about. I've decided that I'm going to start writing. What is it that I need to do from a technical perspective to actually start a blog? Because you give some really good advice about, you know, do I go cheap? Do I spend some money? What do I do?
Right. And one of the first things that I advise people to do is not go so cheap that it's free, because you're going to give up things like control and ownership, and potentially a poor impression on your readers by going that cheap, that free, like a free WordPress site or a Medium blog, something like that. You don't own that content, which means it can be taken away from you at a moment. You can't control the environment. So like if you're blogging, you know, on Medium, for instance, well, it's Medium's masthead that's at the top, not your business name, right? You aren't able to put things in the sidebar and the footer, those kinds of considerations. Again, if you're doing it for fun, that's fine. If you're doing it as an experiment because you're not sure if this is going to work, that's okay. But if you know this is what you want to do, if you've taken the time to research a topic and you know there's an audience out there, you know there's potential, then it's worth spending $100, $200, whatever, to get yourself started. And that's really all it takes. I mentioned I work for SiteSell. The SiteSell subscription is only $300, and that includes domain name, hosting, a website builder, keyword research tools, and basically an MBA, an online MBA in teaching you how to run an online business. So if you're just starting a blog, a couple $100 tops. Now you've got a domain name, you've got a host. I give some recommendations in the book, and you can install WordPress. That's the easiest tool for creating a blog. You can create blog posts, you can create pages, and do all kinds of wonderful things relatively easily.
And WordPress is very straightforward. I mean,
yes,
you know, I've got using it, and I think there's a statistic, isn't there, that something like 30-40% of the internet is actually based on WordPress or something like that. You know, it's you know, there's so many WordPress sites. I mean, our company website is on WordPress, and it doesn't take very long to actually, you know, get one of those up and running. And there's so many plugins. And there's the formats that you can change from, so you can decide whether it's a, you know, for $40 you can get a magazine format, or you can get a, you know, and the templates formats, which are just so simple to use.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. In fact, that's something I often have to make clear to people who aren't familiar with WordPress and content management systems. It's a database-driven site, which means there are not HTML pages for every single article or page that you write. They don't exist as physical files. They exist in a database. And the website, the WordPress site, displays those dynamically whenever somebody decides that they want to go to that site, which means the overall look and feel is managed by a theme, as you just said, or a template. So that means you can change the entire look and feel of your website just by installing and activating a new theme. Even if you commission a custom theme, you don't need a new website. You don't need to reinstall WordPress with somebody else. You don't need them to build you a whole new site if you've already started one.
So in terms of writing blogs, what's your view in terms of structure and format and length and stuff like that? And you know, if I'm starting out, what's your view on that?
That's a good question. I don't specifically say this in the book, but I do like bloggers to come up with their own structure, their own format, because it's going to be very unique to them. We're each different people. We're each talking about different things. We're each talking to a different audience. Therefore, my blog post really shouldn't look anything like your blog posts in terms of structure. But in the book, I presented a very basic structure to get people started, because you're going to need to write 10, 20, 50 blog posts before you really understand how you prefer to write and how you prefer to structure your posts. So in the book, I give a basic 5-paragraph example, because that's what I learned in high school. And that is to have an introduction, 3 points with examples, and a conclusion. It's interesting because now today with online writing, I mean, because those 5-paragraph essays I was writing by hand back in high school, right? A couple decades ago. Today, we want shorter paragraphs. So even a quote unquote 5-paragraph essay would actually probably be 20 paragraphs today. Same amount of words and information, but almost every other sentence now has got to be its own paragraph, because that's how people prefer to consume content.
Yes. So I mean, when we write blogs, generally they're about 500 words, which is about one size of A4 paper. And that's kind of what we see people wanting to consume. But as you talk about in the book, you could be writing 2,000 words or 5,000 words. So just to give people an understanding, my book, the chapters are about 5,000, 6,000 words. So it's a 62,000 word book. So I'm just in terms of the translation. But you know, it all depends on how you feel. And sometimes, so the way that I was told to blog was just to write. And sometimes I would actually just write and write and write and write. And then I would actually take the article that I'd written, which was probably 2,000 words, and then cut it down into 2 or 3. But
yeah, that can absolutely work sometimes. A lot of it depends on your target niche. And I'll give you an example. If you are like in the entertainment industry, right, and you're blogging about entertainment, I would say a 2,000 word article is probably way too long, because your audience isn't going to appreciate that. They're not that interested in the topic. They're looking for quick reads. Whereas if you're in my space, the articles can be quite a bit longer, and that's okay, because we're teaching, I'm educating, I'm providing a lot of information, and that's appreciated, and those actually perform better. So that's, again, some more research I would want to do. If I was starting a new blog, I would want to look at other blogs that are comparable in that same space. Look at the ones that are performing the best. You can use a tool like BuzzSumo to plug in a URL and see the articles that are performing best in terms of social shares and traffic. How long are they? What are they talking about? What structure are they using? What style are they taking? You don't want to copy that, but you do want to learn whenever possible from what other people are doing and see what you can't take for yourself.
And I think, you know, if you were writing for maybe an academic audience, that they would sit down and expect to read something and take their time to actually read it. Whereas, you know, if you're talking to a sales or marketing audience, they're probably sitting down with a cup of coffee and they've got 5 or 10 minutes. So how long? And it all depends, again, back to have a think about who your audience is and write for the audience. You can write for yourself, but also write for the audience as well.
Right. And there's ways to do that. Because like you said, if you decide you want to write on a topic and you sit down and you crank out 2,500 words, but you know your audience doesn't tend to appreciate posts of that length, chop it up. That could be 5 blog posts in a series. If that makes sense for your audience, to do it that way. And that can sometimes be even more powerful, to have 5 articles in a row that come out every other day or every other week, whatever your publishing schedule is, and you all link them together. So that helps time on site and all those kinds of things.
But that also gives you, if it's 1 of 5, that gives a reason for people to actually, you can go out and find new people, but also you're going to get people coming back.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That's the call to action at the end of articles 1 through 4. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next article when it comes out.
absolutely. And that's one of the things that you also talk about in terms of the call to action being being a really important part of the blog. So explain to me what a call to action is.
So important. And again, this was something that I didn't know for many years, right? So if you go back to some of my really, really old blog posts, there's no call to action. There's nothing there. What that means is that at the end of the article, what do you want the reader to do next? Give them something to do, a call for them to take an action. Now, that could be a business action, right? That could be call me, subscribe, sign up here, buy this, something along those lines. But only if it makes sense. Only if you think that somebody reading that particular piece of content would be ready to take that action at the end of the piece of the content. If you don't think that's the case, then another great call to action is, okay, read this next. And often that's usually the best call to action, because generally, ultimately, what we want to do is set up funnels of content within our site where we have different kinds of articles that are leading people down a journey, down a path where ultimately they're going to become a subscriber or a customer of some kind, whatever your business model is. But all those other articles up at the top of the funnel, you can't lead them to the sale with that first article. It's too high up. They're not ready. And I know this is very vague and conceptual at this point, but bear with me. As you create these individual articles at the top of the funnel, instead of trying to get the sale, just tell them what to go read next, right? So I published an article Monday that talked about how long one should expect to wait before they start to make money from a blog. Because that's usually the first question I get, right? I'm going to start a blog. How long before I can, actually start to make some money to pay for this blog? And then, of course, do all the things that I want to do. So I talked through that. And at the end of the article, I put a very strong call to action. I said, your next step now is to go read how to start a blog. Right. Whether you've actually started one or not, you need to read this book. I put this together for you so that you can make sure that what you're talking about is in the right direction, all these different ways to monetize it and so on. So that was a strong CTA, and it works. People read my how to make money blogging basically article, and which is relatively short for me, and they get to the end and then they go read the longer resource.
Right. And I think that's a really good point, which is you can't expect to write a blog and then make a sale. And you do take people on a journey through, because what you're doing is that you're educating them, or you're empowering them to get to the point where they go, do you know, if I'm going to write a blog, the only place I'm going to ask for to get this done is Mike, because Mike seems to know his stuff. So that's kind of what you want, but also it's about empowering them to get to that place. I think it's really good counsel.
Yeah, because there's a really interesting Google Analytics metric that I rarely hear people talking about, and that is new versus returning visitors. Right. We see it all the time. We'll look at our Google Analytics and we'll see that we got 2,000 people yesterday, and we'll see that 1,700 of them were new. That's a really high percentage of new visitors, and it's like that for most sites. Most of your traffic coming into your site, it's their first time. They've never been there before, and they're just now finding you via a Google search or something like that. They're researching a topic, and they found one of your articles, not your homepage typically, or your about page or something like that. They found a specific piece of content that answers a specific question. And if day after day after day, most of your traffic are new visitors, that means these people aren't coming back, right? You can look at the returning visitors metric, and you can see that it's just a smaller portion of your site's overall traffic that have been there before, at least according to Google Analytics. Yep. Now, obviously, if they clear cache and it's been 6 months, then they're going to look like new. But the fact remains, these are people who probably never been here before, and they're not going to come back. So we want to do whatever we can within each of our individual pieces of content to keep them on the site, to keep them digging, to give them some reason to come back again another day.
Yeah, Jeff Bullis in Australia, he wrote an article about his blogs, and he deliberately writes articles that people will. He has a particular person, usually a mid tier person with in marketing, who's, marketing director comes out and says, can you write me this? And what he does is he writes articles that he knows that people will bookmark, so, which immediately people will then come back to, whether it's 3 months, 4 months, or 6 months away. And he's always thinking about that. I need to get new people, but I also need to bring people back to the site. And I think that's really important.
I love that. In fact, on some of my longer articles, because I do like to write, so most of my articles are long, but this one in particular, this how to start a blog, was 15,000 words. That's massive for a blog post, right? So right off the front, I actually tell people, bookmark this.
Right.
And I've done that a few times, and I think it works. It's hard to really measure that for sure, but that's exactly to your point. What Jeff is doing is great. You want them to bookmark that resource, and I've done it myself. I've got some articles that I just love. And I continually go back to either to re-inspire me or re-motivate me or re-educate me, whatever the topic was. And I've got them in a bookmarks folder, and I'll keep going back to them time and again.
Fantastic. Mike, this has been fantastic. I've learned a lot. I hope the rest of the audience does. So Mike, remind people again where they can get hold of you and where they can get hold of your ebook.
Yeah, so just go to thesocialmediahat.com, and it's right there on the homepage, how to start a blog. I'm going to keep it there for a long time because I love this resource, and I love that people are using it to start their blogs and move in the right direction.
Yeah, and they can find you at the Social Media Hat on Twitter, can't they? And you're active on Facebook, and that because you're always active on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm all over the place, and sadly, I've been doing this for so long. All the different social networks, my name isn't the same, right? So Twitter, it's Mike_Allton. Facebook, it's Allton. That was the first Allton on Facebook. Google Plus, it's plus Mike Allton. Instagram, it's Malton. So I apologize for all of that. But they can find
use the same picture all over the place, so don't you?
What's that?
You use the same picture, image.
I do use the same picture, yes.
Yeah, so
and it still looks like me, so that's good. I haven't changed over the years.
Mike, that's been fantastic. Great to talk to you.
I really appreciate you having me on.
If people are looking to start a blog, they should certainly come across to your site and download and read your ebook. Thank you very much today. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Cheers, Mike. Thanks.
Bye-bye.